Thank you all very much for being with us today. As I said, my name is Adis Jugo. Today with me in the background is Bart Vessels, and in about few seconds we are actually going to start to talk about our today's topic is getting out of the on-prem lock-in. We are witnessing that a lot of companies are now on the verge or in the process or thinking about making a next step in digital transformation in their collaboration and information worker infrastructure and applications and processes. We are going to see today what impediments, what challenges, and what issues they might and they will probably meet on the road. Few words about me. My name is Adis Jugo. I'm Director of Product Technology at Skybow AG. Skybow is a Swiss company. We are creating a platform for business developing rapid business solutions on top of Office 365 and SharePoint. And I'm working in Skybow in multiple roles. One is working tightly with our partners, helping them on the projects implemented on Skybow platform. B is working as a part of our architecture team, and C is doing evangelism part and talking on different Microsoft and community events. Since I'm Microsoft MVP for Office development is my background, and Microsoft MVP for Office servers and services, what was earlier known as SharePoint MVP. I'm blogger and speaker and author on adisjugo.com. A lot of what we are going to talk about today you can find on my blog and see there and take a peek if it's interesting for you. So as we know, since few years now, actually since good 8 years now, we are talking about transition to cloud. The Azure actually started arriving in 2010, and 1 year later we got to Office 365. And as the both platforms are becoming more and more mature, we see an increased number. I could even say a real rush to the cloud happening at the moment. Either companies are either switching to the pure cloud setup or setting for hybrid technologies, and talking and seeing what can be done and what can happen and what can't. Agenda for today is basically we are going to see the challenges, the processes, and the stuff for the people who are migrating from SharePoint on-premises installation, usually 2007, 2010, and 2013, to some cloud or hybrid deployments with them to Office 365, cloud, or hybrid situations there. So we are going to take a look about the issues and challenges happening there. We are going to take a look at the data migration. We are going to take a look at what happens with the customizations which are happening on your SharePoint servers, starting with this SharePoint Designer customizations, InfoPath, workflows, access services, and on the end custom code. I mean, those are the typical artifacts that can be found on basically every SharePoint major SharePoint server, and each of them is a small construction place and an issue which you need to overcome in migration to cloud. So how we were all starting, we were installing one or more or dozens of SharePoint servers around and doing different customizations around those servers. The easiest ones and basically which that you can find everywhere are SharePoint Designer customizations. That people are creating or changing master pages with SharePoint Designer, or changing some of the forms, or creating some of the views. So those are the basically the easiest one which you can always find. InfoPath was basically a big shot, and still is with Microsoft SharePoint. This was a tool for rapid forms development, where you could create intelligent forms which could predict users' input and do the stuff with users' input. Situation with InfoPath today, that's in the end of development. We are in prolonged support until 2026, but there's a deprecation pending. We have a lot of issues with InfoPath today, which we are going to talk about a bit later. The third one is Microsoft workflows on top of Microsoft SharePoint. Historically, we differ between two different types of workflows. ones are IIS hosted, or we call them old SharePoint workflows, which are available until SharePoint 2010, and in 2013 and 16 in legacy mode, and so-called new workflows, which we have based on Microsoft Workflow Manager, which is a separate product, and which have a separate host, but are executed in context of SharePoint. So we are taking but in the same time in cloud, we have new player in the field, which is Microsoft Flow. So we are going to take a look what's going on with the workflow and how can we deal in this arena. Maybe the most urgent thing is if you have access services. And access services were very popular since they were very convenient. People could use access client or even web app to create applications which would have forms, reports, data relations, the advanced data handling, and publish them in cloud in SharePoint context. Access services are, as we speak now, are basically dying. They will be canceled in cloud, in Office 365, in SharePoint Online in April this year. So if you have access services running in Office 365, you've got about 2 to 3 more months to do something about them. And all the information which is reaching us for the moment is they are probably going to be left out of SharePoint Server 2019, which is also coming out this year. And so yes, if you have older versions of SharePoint and if you keep those installations, you will be able to keep your access services. But basically, this is very much a dead end about everything what is going on about the technology. And on the end, custom code. We know that the custom code, source code that we have been developing for SharePoint Server was mainly server side, was mainly C# based on the .NET and specific SharePoint server side APIs. This cannot be executed anymore in SharePoint Online. So there are new development models happening in SharePoint Online, and this is definitely something that you need to take a look into if you have this code and if you have solutions based on SharePoint Server based on server side code, what to do about them in the near future. This is a Skybow webinar, and I am working for Skybow, but we are going to introduce way more tools than only Skybow. This is a technology neutral webinar. I will be speaking about different other products though in this webinar, since you don't really have to do everything manually. There are different tools which can help you in your way to transition on your way to cloud, which can help you in your transition. So yeah, I will not refrain of mentioning those tools in appropriate setups, in appropriate conditions where they should really be happened. Because really there is no need to do a lot of this stuff manually. Maybe the most simple part, because this is really with us since long time, and it's really mature, and it's really we have those tools since dozens of years. In the meantime, 10+ years, is migrating data. So migrating data is a big part of SharePoint's history and SharePoint's presence and SharePoint's future, because through all different upgrades and migrations, we actually probably already did these kinds of migrations in the past as well. So obviously what we need to migrate is this typical SharePoint data hierarchy from site collection, sites and subsite, content types, permissions and security, which is kind of a parallel hierarchy being associated with your content, list libraries, and the content itself, like items and files in SharePoint. So this is usually what you do with this migration. Beside migration, which usually is perceived as copy-paste from place A to place B, most of the time you do some kind of data transformation with this one. Since you probably are not going to migrate everything. Usually, as with every technology we are going to, or every point which are going to tackle today, you're probably going to make a catalog. Which data do you need? Which data is only historic data, could be archived to probably some other archiving system. Which data is not needed at all, and which data needs to be migrated to cloud or to next version of SharePoint, and does this data need to be transformed in the process. I'm going to mention 3 tools here. I will be referring to them as the big 3 in the few more times in the process of this webinar. It's basically MetaLogic Context Matrix, APoint Doc, and the ShareGate. Those 3 tools, what you see now on the picture is a screenshot of MetaLogic's Context Matrix. Is basically both of all of those tools are able to give you the one-to-one parallel view to the source and destination to decide which data needs to be migrated, copied, and does this data need to be migrated, does this data need to be transformed during this migration and to be transformed to some other form in your destination. Basically, all of those 3 tools do this properly and do this right. What's missing in all 3 tools is basically this permission management part, which is present in all of them on some kind of rudimentary level. And that's the reason why for permissions management, permissions analysis, and even permissions transfer, you will probably need to go to some other tool to analyze this. Why we are talking? Why is this so important? For very simple reasons that if you are migrating to cloud, even if you have Azure AD Connect in place, you are probably going to need to do some kind of identity transformation from your Windows Active Directory, which you have on-prem, to Azure Active Directory. Or maybe it's the farm that you are moving in totally different domain. There are all different reasons why you need to consider permissions as a separate part, as a separate entity by migration. The tool I'm suggesting here, and probably the best tool on the market, is called SPDockit. It's from Cisco. It's a small, lightweight, and relatively cheap tool, which actually is able to analyze the permissions to give you information about that one. I have SPDockit, and a somewhat older version, but it works exactly well. Open here, and one of the reports that you are seeing on the screen is user-based report that I can see for each of my users based on the site web application and site collection and sites that I want to analyze. Is giving me that the user 4 in this site collection has the following permissions, which you see here in this column, on following sites or any other content. And those permissions are given either directly or through some kind of SharePoint groups, or even through the Windows Active Directory groups. So SharePoint SPDockit is basically able to understand where does this permission from the users comes from, how they are operating. You can export those permissions and you can transform them. You can compare permissions, and you can do all the different permissions analysis to actually know who has access of the data. Does some users have which shouldn't have access? Let's say the users that left your company or whatever still have some access of the data, or is there maybe orphaned content which should be content without any user which can actually access it in SharePoint? This kind of analysis is very important. A, before you start migrating your content. B, for your decision to know what to do with permissions during this content migration. So I would really suggest that you take a look, a short look at the SPDockit permissions management and permissions report. You will see that there are a lot of different interesting stuff that can happen here, and that can work like that. I'm going back now to my PowerPoint and moving from content itself to the first customizations which we have here, and which is SharePoint Designer based customizations. As I said, they are probably the most common one, because SharePoint Designer was a very tool which was very popular, a lot of use by both by professional consultants and by power users. And we'll see now what's happening with this one. Again, as with everything, you should perform an analysis before you actually start migrating anything, including a SharePoint Designer, SharePoint Designer customizations. As I've stated here, not everything can be migrated, and let's see what is actually what can be and what's actually going on here. So workflows. When we speak here about workflows, some of those workflows can be migrated to SharePoint Online, but not everything can be there. For example, out-of-the-box workflow changes will not be overwritten by ongoing update. So if you are having running workflows, you need to see what to do about those before migrations. The big thing here, as you can see here, is a general branding. All those other points are basically, except with the content blocks, we are coming to them later, are somehow connected to the branding. But we had our standard and known branding techniques with SharePoint Designer or maybe other tools, to creating master pages, to creating custom style sheets. We all know it's definitely behaving differently in SharePoint Online, where customizing master pages is possible but not really recommended, because if you customize your master page and there is a significant SharePoint Online update coming, it might happen that your look and feel of your SharePoint Online will be broken for the end users. That the navigation might be broken, and this kind of stuff might, all this kind of stuff might be broken. So if you have had branding based on master pages or standard branding techniques, which we had for SharePoint on premises, you might consider abandoning these kind of branding customizations and creating new parallel one in cloud in SharePoint Online. This is especially true for intranet sites, because we know from the historic point of view they were all very much branding heavy and corporate identity heavy. We all want our intranets to look like our corporate design, which is true, which is still true. But the whole thing about publishing, we are moving away from the whole publishing thing. So the new kid in the block is obviously communications pages with SharePoint Online. So you should maybe think of how to translate your existing intranet designs to SharePoint Online communication pages. When I say translate, I really mean how to rethink branding and how to achieve the same visual identity, corporate identity with communication side as you will do with standard branding, and to actually move only the content around that one. The second big point here is actually navigation. We knew navigation, we were creating a navigation different phase in SharePoint on premises. I will just mention some of those. We use navigation providers, we use the managed metadata based, managed metadata service based navigation, etc., etc. This all does not really work on this way in SharePoint Online. Microsoft has created a web page helping you to migrate or to rethink your navigation to SharePoint Online. This is the link that you can see here with navigation option for SharePoint Online. You will be getting this deck, so you'll be able to click on this link later. But Microsoft basically did a nice thing explaining how this actually works with SharePoint Online and what to do with different navigation options. This is a longer document where you need probably to delve in and to see what's possible, but there are ways. One thing, especially in intranets, which is often overlooked and which often causes problems in practice, are content blocks. We had something called content-based queries in SharePoint Online, in SharePoint and SharePoint Online. The difference in SharePoint Online, those queries are throttled. So you are not getting all the results the same way you would be getting them in SharePoint on premises. Microsoft had to do that really to kind of defend itself from sometimes very ill-meant queries which are putting very heavy very heavy working on the SharePoint Online. So that's the reason why this throttling is there. So you are probably going to have to rework some of those if you are heavily using it, to enable some kind of paging or lazy loading or whatever you might want to have it is. There are techniques, there are possibilities, but this is just like a warning signal. You might want actually to take a look at those if you have been using them. One of the main content blocks from today, obviously, because it's one of the main points today, is InfoPath. InfoPath was for a long time preferred solution for building forms or SharePoint lists. InfoPath really has grown to be a second application layer on top of SharePoint if you want it. So people would create data structures in SharePoint to lists and libraries, but would delegate the whole UI thing, the whole user experience things to InfoPath, because creating forms with InfoPath was actually very easy and was seamless, and it was saving a lot of time when compared to the classical development techniques. Not surprising, InfoPath had millions of users worldwide. This was really probably one of the most popular technologies on top of SharePoint stack. InfoPath today is deprecated. So Microsoft actually wanted to shut it down a few years ago and to replace it with a technology called Fossil, Forms on SharePoint lists. But Fossil was delayed due to the different reasons in Microsoft. So Fossil never made, even if it was technologically finished, Microsoft decided not to publish it. So what happened then? Microsoft extended the support for InfoPath from 2000 to 2026, but clearly stated that they are not going to invest anything in development on InfoPath anymore. So basically what we have now is InfoPath in a state of nirvana. It's there. It's going to be there for at least 8 more years, but this is a dead-end technology, and this is something that you should take a look in replacing actually as soon as possible, and definitely not doing any new development on top of that one, especially because there's one thing that InfoPath with code behind does not work with Office 365. And I've heard from people in Microsoft that Office 365 SharePoint Online is now the largest graveyard of the dead InfoPath forms, because it was just very easy to write code behind in C# in InfoPath and to publish it as a sandbox solutions with code. But those are not functional in cloud since August this year. So basically, there's a lot of these forms with code still being stored in the cloud, but not being able to execute. And there are other stuff with InfoPath which are basically coming out now. There are reports that problems with InfoPath, with Outlook 16 emails. When the mobile view is enabled, InfoPath doesn't work. InfoPath is, on the end of the day, a dead end. So you need to see what to do with your existing InfoPath forms, and moreover, you should stop developing on InfoPath if you still do, because this is not something that actually has any kind of future. You will often hear from Microsoft that Power Apps would be InfoPath's successor. So be careful, Microsoft is not using word replacement, because Power Apps are not InfoPath replacement. They don't have InfoPath capabilities, not even nearly InfoPath capabilities. They're more mobile oriented, more for the power user oriented, which have only some of the InfoPath features fully implemented. We're going to see it later. Let's say the security with Power Apps is also kind of problematic, because you can alongside SharePoint or SQL Server, you can use security sources. You can use data sources such as Twitter, such as Facebook, or whatever. So it's really easy combining those environments basically to say, okay, everything which comes each time I enter something in my Power App, I will have a flow behind which tweets that to Twitter, on a way that we connect SharePoint list and Twitter, Now, it might be appealing to some politicians, but for the most of the farm admins and the form of the IT admins, this would be a nightmare. So that's the reason why we put security like +0, which is not what Power Apps can't really handle properly. Power Apps can do complex forms. So master detail are possible in some cases in tablet view, but it's actually more not that yes. Power Apps are not SharePoint native. They are basically used for all different technologies. And if you use them in SharePoint, they are basically embedded as an iframe into your SharePoint page. You have very limited field behaviors like validation, like calculation, this kind of stuff. This is basically very limited with, to just very rudimentary options with Power Apps. There is no code behind. If you are stuck with somewhere, you can't fall back to making some short code snippets, which will do, let's say, advanced validation. That's just impossible. And the form and control actions are really very rudimentary, and this all does not bring a very satisfactory experience when trying to do this with Power Apps. What you need to do, basically, when you go away from InfoPath, the first thing you need to do is to identify what you want to migrate. What's at all interesting for a migration step. And again, create a catalog with forms or solutions, let's say, put it at InfoPath, which are outdated and you don't need to migrate. Identify those who are who need just to be archived for the future use, to be used in a read-only, and identify those which need to be migrated in the full capacity to the new technology stack. You will need to see which forms need to be migrated, what's decided on the data, and on the end to decide the forms technology which are going to be used as a replacement. We'll come to that a bit later. For analyzing, there is one product on the market. It's called the Rancor SP Transformator. You can look it up later on the internet. Basically, Rancor SP Transformator is able to, there we have it, to analyze your environment for all different things, not only InfoPath, but one of the things SP Transformator is able to do for you is actually to analyze InfoPath forms. I have opened the existing analyzation because it lasts for over 2 hours for this farm here. And believe me, this is my development farm. There are all different kind of funny stuff here. It identifies InfoPath forms. You see these XSN files, those are InfoPath forms, and tell you what exactly can be, what is in that InfoPath form, what can be done and what can't be done. For example, we have here expense report. When we click on that one, we even get this expense report rendered to see what was exactly this. Okay, that's that. We see here what's this is a relatively simple form. We have only one view. We have 0 data connections except of SharePoint. We have no rules and we have no custom assemblies. So this is basically a very simple one. There's only a UI element to it which we need to create in some new technology. But if I close this one and open, let's say this one, employee registration, we see after it's loaded, it takes a few seconds. There it is. We see that this is a more complex form, maybe not in the UI base, a more complex form, but we see here that we actually have multiple data connections. Some of those are basically reading to SharePoint lists. Those are easy. But we have a connection to the standard XML, static XML files. We have connection to the web service, get user profile by name. So obviously there is a web service getting user profiles by its name, and basically retrieving data from the some kind of other web services. So we said we have different here data connections. We have 0 rules, but we do have one custom assembly. And if we open this one, we can even get the code running this assembly, and we can see what was actually this InfoPath form doing, and why, for example, what was happening when the country has been changed. And we can see, do we need this form? and if we need this form, how we can change it. If we want InfoPath parity one-to-one, there's basically one tool today on the market which is able, okay, it opened now the wrong slide. This is fine, it doesn't really matter. There's really one tool which can do this one-to-one. We're coming to that one, and this tool is Lightning Forms from the company called Lightning Tools. It's a British company. Their forms are SharePoint native. They follow standard SharePoint security considerations. So SharePoint security will be its security. So there is like no additional security layer of that. You can develop complex master detail form. That one you can have complex validations, calculations, and field behaviors. It's here written code behind, but it's actually code in front. You are using JavaScript to do any further form customizations, and you can have form actions and processes for this one. I'm going to shortly show you how Lightning Forms forms work. For that purpose, I actually created a small data model in SharePoint. Those are all SharePoint lists and libraries. And the use case here is each of us want to go to different SharePoint conferences from time to time. So we have an event applications where employee applies to his manager or to his HR to go to attend a SharePoint conference somewhere around. So we have a list of conferences, obviously here, events. They are also grouped by countries. We have obviously employees. We have the event applications list, which is the main one. And we basically can collect different leads if we were a salesperson at the conference, or collect different documents such as, I don't know, PowerPoint presentations or videos or whatever. So let's try to do this. In order to make this, I actually had a very I have created a very simple SharePoint site, vanilla site. This I'm just going to open it right now. It is there. We are. It's event management. If I go to the site contents, we are going to basically to see all those countries, event applications, events, etc., etc. I pre-populated events with some events which are happening all over Europe and the United States in the next month, so that we can use it. We can use it for the as a start. So if you go, let's say, to the event applications list, in the list we have here, I have installed already the Lightning Forms here. So I'm going to create a new form for this one to make entering this data, this application data, easier, and to make this this whole process easier for the end user, for this one who want to go to applications, to go to the conferences. We see here that I can now do basically whatever I want. I can move fields, I can resize fields, I can group fields on different levels. So I'm basically going just to use one of those. I'm going to put some tabs here, and I'm going to put first tab, which is going to be a request. And I'm going to make a second tab, which is going to be approval. So I'm going in the request tab, I'm just going to put title, employee, country, event, and then I'm going to put predicted costs here. And I'm going to put reasons, since reasons can be field and validation, like everybody needs to at least enter 100 characters for this. And in approval part, I'm just going to move approved, approved by, and I'm going to leave the number of leads and status outside of the tabs, and I'm just going to delete attachments from there. So I have this. So basically, I just created a very nice tabbed interface in few clicks. So let's try to make this form a bit more intelligent before we start. Title, okay, we can say, okay, what do we need? What do we know from title? I don't want my user to type title, hey, Bart wants to go to a European Collaboration Summit in Mainz. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to calculate actually title. And I'm going to use a template where I'm going to say my employee, and I'm going to use his full name, wants to go to event. I have event, and I have event value in, and I'm going to put country of this event. Okay, so this is a calculated field already, employee. I could even now pull the employee from my default employees, country event from my current employee. I'm actually going to do that right now. So behavior, and I'm going to put the initial value of employee is my current user, her login name, I have country and event. And before I go on, I'm just going to say this shortly. There we are. And here I'm going to make event basically dependent on country. So if I use, if I select a country, let's say Germany, I'm going to show only events from that country. So I'm creating a cascading, very easily creating a cascading lookup. And here in predicted costs, I'm going also to make this a calculated field to say this predicted cost is my value of the is my price of the event plus, let's say, 500 euros for travel costs. This is going to be assignment. This is also going to be assignment behavior type. Exactly. So we can now, no, not yet. I'm going now to approval. And here in approval, I'm going to add a new button. And this will be button detections. I'm going to call this button approve. But I'm just going to say that this button is setting a form field value from this list, and it's going to be approved. And I'm going to send, no, I'm going to say approved by, and I'm going to put approved by. I'm again going to use current user. I could theoretically go to the employee here and use some of the employees, some of the profile members. For example, I could use manager here or whatever. So I can access all the profile properties from here, but I'm just going to use, I'm just going to use the current user's ID as an assigned property. I'm going to save this, and on save, I'm going to a bit more to customize the save button. Before we say, after we say, but before we do the redirection, I actually want to send an email. I want to send an email to from current user email to, let's say, employee to current users managers, let's say, or just in order to it comes to me, I'm just going to use my own email also here. And I can put subject new request, and I can then open this builder, new request for to go to event, and here, hello employee wants to go to, and I'm just going to use now event country here, event country. Okay. So if I save this form now, and open this, of course, in new window, this event applications. And if I start here, hey, I want a new item, actually. You see, this is all client side. I have no third-party application here except for this Lightning Tools app. You see that I'm immediately here in. You see that my title is Adis Jugo wants to go in. And so I'm going to say Germany. I'm going to say European Collaboration Summit in Mainz this year. Since the ticket is 180 euros, you see that my predicted costs are 680. So I'm adding this 500 euros to ECS in Mainz. Reasons, because it's the best conference in Europe this year, and I can even have here a number of leads, status, come to this later. But if I click here on this button, I forgot to change the name, and click on approval, you see that approved by is also Adis Jugo. I'm now a bit misusing this new form. You would usually do that it's an edit form or somewhere else, but to save time, how easy is actually to create master detail relations here? Is I'm going to say insert sublist leads. This list just has to have a lookup to the parent list, and the form is going to be reloaded once more time. We have master detail relations with repeating table immediately added here. I'm going to save this. I'm going to refresh this. Before I do, I'm going to do one more thing here. I have here a number of leads. I'm going to make this also a calculated field. Oh, it's not loaded yet. I'm going to none. So number of leads, calculated field. I have immediately my sublist object now leads, and I'm just going to calculate it's a silent, and I'm going to use count of those items here. I could use one of those predefined functions, or I could make my own function. That's not a big deal. So now I'm going to save and to restart. It's here, and keep editing. Restart here. So now, as I type here stuff, you see a number of leads increasing as I type. Of course, I could change the format here to have a not to have a digit, not to have the values behind the decimal point, but that's basically the how it goes. So you see, like basically with Lightning Forms, you can one-to-one have feature parity with InfoPath forms. Basically, do everything what you could do with InfoPath, with one exception. Again, Germany European Collaboration Summit. The title is set properly. With one exception, they don't have connections to other data sources. Basically, they can work only with SharePoint. So if you don't need connections to SQL Server or whatever, you can basically, and you are okay with you are using SharePoint lists and libraries as your store. Lightning Tools is the most mature product on the market. Lightning Tools Forms is basically the most mature product on the market actually to do exactly this. Now, that's much about forms. I'm just going to say one more thing about it before we go. When we migrate InfoPath stuff, if your InfoPath data has been in lists, so if it was the forms on InfoPath forms on lists, there is no problem with migrating data from InfoPath, from on-premises to online or whatever. You can just use MetaLogic, ShareGate, or AvePoint. They will all work just fine. But if you have used the forms libraries in InfoPath, they are basically a set of XML files stored in those form libraries. None of these migration tools can transform those automatically. You are going to use custom PowerShell. You are going to actually develop PowerShell to get your data out of those XML files from the form libraries. There is no other way out of that. Okay, we have done that. Short diagram about Lightning Forms comparing to InfoPath. As you see, all those major features are supported. One thing which is not supported basically is connections to the external systems. If you don't need those, go for Lightning Tools. This is actually quite good. I have written a free ebook on InfoPath replacement. So if you really want to deep dive into all this terminology, into all this problematic, download it from here, and you're good to go. Workflow migration. Workflows very often used by InfoPath or by workflows on list or whatever to actually do the data processing in the background. We have already mentioned those two types of workflows with old workflows from SharePoint 2007 to 2010, actually also 2016 in legacy mode, and the new workflow manager workflows in SharePoint 2013 and 16. But also there are also workflows like Nintex, like K2, like WebCon, like all the others, which are also very often found on the systems. Basically, those big three can easily migrate workflows from SharePoint workflows, old ones and new ones. They can all be easily migrated with few constraints, that only the most recent version of the workflow associations can be migrated, and workflow templates can be migrated as soon as they are defined locally. Reason for that, workflow templates in the new workflows cannot be migrated because those templates are not defined in SharePoint but on Workflow Manager, which is separate workflow post. So basically, we have few last 2 points are the issues which you might have with the new workflows. One is workflow templates, and workflow instances and history cannot be migrated for the new workflows. From a simple reason, they are not migratable in the SharePoint. They are a separate product. Nintex workflow can be migrated by MetaLogic and ShareGate, not by AvePoint. And to my knowledge, no other workflow type like K2 or WebCon can be migrated out of the box with those tools. So if you have those, contact the workflow manufacturer to see how to do those migrations. I know for sure that ShareGate and MetaLogic can migrate Nintex workflows pretty well. Yeah, this is just a MetaLogic screenshot how the MetaLogic content matrix actually how many options about workflow migration there are. So if you go for this, you can be sure that your workflows are actually going to be there. Now the two more big points I kept for the last two migration points. One is access services, and second one and the last one will be custom code. We give you guys 15 more minutes, enough actually to cover those both. If you are using access services or any other third-party tool on SharePoint on premises that you have used to build applications on top of SharePoint, business solutions on top of SharePoint, and those were really different ones, from onboarding to, I don't know, expenses to holiday requests, etc., etc. Those are the things that access services or similar were very popular to use on SharePoint on premises. You need to get out of it. Access services is being deprecated. They will be removed from SharePoint Online in April 2018, which is in 2.5 months. It's a safe bet they are not going to come in SharePoint 2019. They will be still present in all environments, like in all SharePoint environments, SharePoint 2013 and 16. So if you are okay with keeping those ones only because of access services, you are okay, but you will probably not want to keep your SharePoint farms only because of that technology. There is no adequate replacement for Microsoft, really, for something that access services would do. There's an issue with data migration, since access services data have been stored either in separate access data SQL databases on SharePoint Online or in SharePoint on premises, or actually in practice hidden from you if you are using SharePoint Online. The logic will not be able to migrate. You will have to redevelop logic, but this is actually a citizen developer story. This is not something that you would probably not need a professional developer for that. Before we go to the logic, business logic being in access services, let's see how to get the data out. If you have SharePoint access services and SharePoint server on premises, that's a relatively easy one. You will need an access client, good old Microsoft Access, and you are going to connect both to this Access DB, which is that's actually the name is kind of crazy, but because it's a SQL Server database, but it's called usually Access DB in your environment. So you can use Access Client to connect to that database, and you are getting your tables, your views, and all the stuff you have there. But also you can use Access to connect to SharePoint lists, either on premises or online. This is perfectly valid. You can use Access Client to connect to your SharePoint lists in cloud. So with that, you basically grab the data from the Access DB on your local SQL Server and literally copy them or even manipulate them or change them. You have Access Client, you have queries, you have whatever you want to do. get them out of the SharePoint of the SQL on premises, and place those data in SharePoint online lists. Now, it's a bit more tricky if you are using Access Web app in SharePoint Online, because you actually don't have direct access to your database. With that in mind, Microsoft has actually developed a built-in functionality. I'm going to show it to you shortly. Microsoft has developed a built-in functionality to actually help you with that. So I'm going to open it right now here to show how this works. If you go to SharePoint to Access Web App, new SharePoint Online, you will have export to SharePoint lists. This is basically the only sound way to get your data from SharePoint Online Access Services to the SharePoint list. Once when you have it in SharePoint list, the process is definitely well described here. You can then start working somehow on this data. The last way, which you can obviously always do, is basically using a PowerShell with all this stuff. But those are two ways I would use in those two cases, on premises or online. For redeveloping logic, I'm going to do a commercial for my own company, since skybow is basically the only producer at the moment who is offering rapid development logic, rapid development possibilities for building business solutions on top of SharePoint Online, and is basically the only real replacement at the moment for access services. We have data modeling through so-called dossiers. We have very advanced UI design to actually match and even overmatch the access form designer. We can implement processes through link actions, aggregations, scheduled actions, and all this stuff, and basically use JavaScript as our native language for that if you need any kind of code on top of that. And we also have reporting built in. So I'm not going to show you how we build it, because it will take too much time. Let me just show you an existing applications here, which we have developed with our partners in the United States. Whatever you see today, just keep in mind, it was developed in less than a day as a kind of test proof of concept, which then went to production. This is a very simple use case. It's in internal purchasing. Basically, you have all the purchase requests that every user is basically able to have a request. I want to purchase, I don't know, keyboards. I want to purchase mouse. I want to purchase whatever. Then somebody from supply chain would actually approve or decline those requests, would build the orders and send the orders to the different suppliers to purchase those things. So it's basically an internal purchasing system. How it works, you see there's one, there's one request from Bart and way more requests from me. I'm going to make 2 more new requests here that we can proceed with this. And I'm going to say, hey, you see my location has been read immediately from my user profile. So it's Germany here. I'm going to purchase something from media. I'm going to ACI glass, item catalog number 1001, item name keyboards, request notes test, because I need to put something inside, unit of measure each, and unit price 100 euros. That's the keyboard, quantity 100, so I'm getting immediately send the price 10,000 euros. If I would put 101 here, I would immediately get a notification that the approval is going to be started. In background, from a simple, we have a threshold of 10,000 euros, basically until since when the separate approval is needed. So I'm going to save this one. I need one more to walk you through the rest of the process. And you see here basically that all the purchases, all the requests, all of them have status. Let's say this one is he's in status submitted. All those are already placed. This one is already assembled, and those are which need a separate approval process with this red sign, and those with the small moon are basically those which are needed overnight. So I'm just, and I can of course immediately filter those and say by the vendor, okay, I need just those from ACI glass. So I'm just getting this one, which is here. I can filter, of course, by any other option. So I'm going to make a new request. It also needs to be from the same vendor. So I'm going to use ACI Glass, category media, mouses, item catalog 1002, mouses, request notes, something, unit of measure each. I'm going to unit price 100, 10, save. So now here I'm going to have two from the ACI Glass. I'm going now to assemble order. Now I'm different person. I'm the one who actually can approve or not approve the orders. When I give it to assemble order, I see all those which are not yet purchased. I say, okay, I want now to do a purchase to ACI Glass. I'm going to select both of them, go to assemble order, put some order date in it, and location is Germany. You see the purchase order number has immediately been created for me in the background, our internal purchase order number. So now when I go back to orders, I see that my new order is here, newly created one. If I open it, we see the order's process status, it's in the assemble mode. Those are the data which you already have about order. I can now push the order, actually go to a paste order. I need to say that this menu here on the left side is definitely user context assembled. So since I'm here, is in the user context. Since I'm here in the guard load, I see all the menus, but usually this is very context specific who sees what. So I need to put here vendor order number. I'm going to put Z1001. And you see, this order has been moved to place. I can now even print order sheet. I'm getting a Word document where basically with my order information immediately they are created out of my SharePoint data and basically do stuff like this. So this is, just keep in mind, this all has been done in literally in less than 1 day. It's fully functional. This is our environment. We call it Skybow Solution Studio. It's fully fledged environment for building rapid solutions on top of SharePoint, which matches everything that you have known from access services and much more, because we also have things like timer jobs. We also have things like sending emails in the background and this kind of stuff. All this what you actually didn't know, what you didn't have in access services as such. So this is basically for if you want to go beyond forms and to build full-fledged solutions on top of SharePoint Online. And the last point for today, 2 more minutes. We are actually going to use exactly those 2 more minutes because we are not going to go into demos here. We're just going to talk about it. Even so, really a big point is a custom server-side code. I speak here about server-side code. I not speak about client-side code on SharePoint Server because it's also possible. Usually, if it's see some code, it's a client-side code of top of SharePoint Server, there's a good chance that you will be able to migrate it to cloud. If we are speaking about server-side code, then you are basically locked into SharePoint Server, and there is no way out, to put it that way. It's not going to be implemented to SharePoint Online now or never, because Microsoft is just not going that way. And it's even for SharePoint Server, it's not anymore a recommended way to how to deploy SharePoint Server. With this, I'm actually coming back to Renko SP Transformator. One of the things you see here, if you go to transformation, is basically users by solution. You see all those solutions which are server-side solutions which are in your code. If we will go now to diagram, you would see all the different solutions. Sorry, and how they relate to each other, and what do you want to do with this? With this, if you go in user by solution, you can basically click on any of those, and you are getting information what's in this solution, including this solution source code. So with this, my suggestion to you would be use a transformator to analyze your farm, Look at the server-side code solutions which you can have. Look at some of the possible transformations which are offered directly to transformators. For example, if you have only declarative solutions, transformator is actually there's a good chance the transformator is going to be able to transform part of that stuff to the something which is cloud feasible, which is cloud ready. For the others, you can at least take a look what they do, who implemented them, what's their purpose, and you can decide, do you want to keep them at all, or they are basically out of date and you don't need them anymore? Do you want to develop them, to recode them, to redevelop them, to get a new developer, new developers who would develop the same functionality for SharePoint Online, or can you use stuff like Skybow Solution Studio maybe to develop it without going into deep development techniques? Again, as with everything else, you need to make a catalog to see what do we have, what kind of solutions, what do we want to keep, and that's what we want to keep. How do we want to transform that to cloud? Custom development or Skybow Solution Studio basically depends on the requirements, depends on the use case, and of the more other stuff. Hey, that will be from me from now from this. Yeah, this again, this is a screenshot from Transformator, and this is the source code view where you can even see how the source codes look like from this solution. This will be from me for today. As I said, in all 5 points, really, first step is plan and analyze. Look what you have, look what you need, and get rid of what that you don't need, and try to make a plan how to go on with this which you need. Migrate data. We've looked at these 3 big clients. Migrate UI and business logic. Depends what you want to do. If you want to do it with Solution Studio, with Lightning Forms, custom coding, whatever, and use the tools on the market. You don't really need to do everything, every single step by yourself. There are tools really, as we have seen today, which can help you, which can push you on in that direction. If you want to meet with us from Skybow, we are on various SharePoint events or Office 365 events. We were in Bremen the last weekend. We are this week in Helsinki. The first huge, first big event which we are in Europe is in Mainz in May 28th to 30, 2018, where we are platinum sponsor. So you meet our guys there in Mainz. If you are in the United States, we are going to be in Branson, Missouri, North American Collaboration Summit soon, and in Washington, D.C. For SharePoint Fest. So meet us on one of those events, talk to us, talk to our people. I will be in some of those events, talk to me. I know that my colleagues will be in some other, that if you are in Helsinki, find Bart and me and let us have a drink together and talk about all this if you are interested. And now, I hope there were questions in the meantime.
Yes, I answered most of them, Adis. There were a few questions on will this be available, and of course, this recording will be available, and you get an email with the link towards this.
I expect sometimes next week.
Yes, there was a question on, do you know if workflows created in Flow can be migrated?
Flow is the only the cloud technology, is cloud only, is cloud hosted. You can basically copy Flow definitions between different accounts, but you cannot migrate Flow to anything else.
Yep. Another question we got is, what do you think about using Skybow Solution Studio instead of Lightning Forms as an InfoPath replacement? I more or less answered it, but could you quickly recap?
That's actually a simple one. If you really need just forms without any more complex logic, maybe the forms, just the form solutions would be sufficient. If you need more complex things like reporting, like all the other, like background processing, like timer jobs, scheduled actions, and this kind of stuff, then you will basically you are basically set for Skybow Solution Studio. But if you just want to redevelop UI and maybe a field validation, field calculation, you will probably also be good only with forms.
Yeah, and then the last question that came in is it possible to customize solutions created in your studio by hand without Studio? Solution Studio?
No, solutions created in skybow Solution Studio can be customized only with Solution Studio, but Solution Studio is free for developers. So if you are a developer, just go to my.skybow.com and try Solution Studio. You can share solutions among the other developers. You can co-work on solutions, this kind of stuff. But solutions which were created in Solution Studio needs to be customized with Solution Studio or edited with Solution Studio.
Then I guess.
Any other questions?
No, the rest is all answered by now. And since we are over time, I think we should.
But not by much, it's only 5 minutes. Hey,
yes.
I thank everybody for being here. And well, stay tuned. This webinar is going to be, the recording of this webinar will soon be outside, soon be published. And stay tuned for the next Skybow webinars. Bye, everyone.
One question coming in. The cost of Solution Studio. In Solution Studio, it's yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. When you build it for developers, it's for free. You have costs per user. There are different cost models per solution, per user, or enterprise solution. There's an icon in Solution Studio itself, basically, which can help you, which can partly guide you on the way. This icon here looks like credit card. It is a credit card actually, and in this case you see this for 1,000 users it will be €1 per solution per user, but there are many more models, so just contact our sales for that one. There's another question, Bart, I think.
Can the forms be used on mobile devices too?
Very soon. Microsoft is just opening APIs for the modern forms. As soon as Microsoft does, we are going to also support modern forms with Solution Studio. In this moment, it's going to definitely be mobile ready. For now, it's SharePoint ready, and SharePoint is not really mobile ready. So as soon as Microsoft opens SharePoint for being responsive, for being mobile ready, we are going to jump on that wagon like immediately. And it's happening as we speak. I think we are expecting first announcements in that direction until the May events in Europe and the United States, like Mainz event in Europe, like European Collaboration Summit in Mainz, and SharePoint Conference North America in Las Vegas. I think Microsoft is coming with some nice surprises and announcements in that direction in those two events. So as soon as Microsoft makes SharePoint mobile ready, we will be mobile ready as well. Hey, if there are no more questions, I wish you all a nice and pleasant evening. And for those of you who are flying to Helsinki, see you in Helsinki. Goodbye.